both of whom were executed. And so there's a little song coming from the civil rights movement, which some of you, I hope, know. And it's a song about faith and courage and hope. I'm going to change, I take the liberty to change a few lines here and there. Bear with me. Peter and Paul, bound in jail, had no money for to go their bail. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Paul and Silas began to pray, and those chains just fell away. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Sing it with me. Hold on. Hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize. Oh, Paul and Silas began to shout. The jail door opened and they walked out. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. The only thing that we did wrong was staying in the wilderness too long. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. The only thing that we did right was to organize for life. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. We've known hatred and violence too, but God's love gonna see us through. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. The only chain we can stand is the chain of hand in hand. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize. Keep your eyes on that prize. Keep your eyes on that prize. And hold on.
Okay, now we've got a special from Texas, and those of us who've come for a number of years all know Delia, and she's on the screen for us.
On the screen.
Not on the screen, sorry.
Can you hear us?
Yes.
Can people hear her?
Yes.
Okay, we've got a couple dozen people here, and you know the drill. So it's Delia Perez-Meyer, and she's a long-time attendee, and you've got the floor.
Thank you, Abraham. That was beautiful art. Thank you so much. And hi, everybody. Hi. It's 100 degrees here. Is it 100 degrees there?
At least. Yes.
Well, I'm just so happy to be here with you guys tonight. I'm sitting here with Gloria Ruback with the Texas Abolition movement. We just came back from a memorial for Louis that was very beautiful, that was put on by the Quakers, by the Friends, who have a contingent that go to visit death row inmates each week. And so it was a very beautiful ceremony with lots of prayer and song and artwork and food, and it was just a beautiful way to send him off to heaven again. And As you all know, my brother passed away on May the 2nd. Evidently, about 2 o'clock in the morning, they came to check on him, and he was not responsive. And from what I understand, they worked on him for about 30 minutes to no avail. And once the ambulance came and took him away, then they called right back and said that he did not make it. So, of course, it was not expected, and it was a huge loss for our family. But he was he died peacefully in his sleep, as far as we know. We are, of course, very, deeply saddened by his loss, but also very grateful that he was not executed by the state of Texas. And another thing that I wanted to share with you guys, and of course, this is something that I'm not supposed to talk about publicly, but
we are live on the internet.
And yeah, exactly. So from what I understand, our district attorney has worked very hard on Louis's case, and they recently found out that it was indeed the railroad serial killer that had murdered our 3 friends. And so his attorneys are working diligently to complete the paperwork that's needed to get him a posthumous exoneration.
Oh. There are people in tears here.
Wow.
Yeah, and there's also people here that do not know anything about Louis or you or the story. So if you could give the 2-minute version, that'd be great.
Sure. Well, Louis Castro Perez was an innocent man on death row. He survived there for 26 years, mostly because of you guys, of all the love and the prayers and the actions that we all took to try to save those guys on death row. And he has a beautiful family with 10 children and grandchildren that love him dearly, and we will all miss him dearly. But he fought hard for his life, and we finally found the truth in his case. And so we're just still waiting for the judges and the courts to do the right thing in this case, and hopefully they will. Abraham, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody who sent, flowers and cards and letters and messages, and they were so uplifting for myself and for our family, and your kindness and love will never be forgotten. The work in Texas is going to continue. As you all know, we had an execution this week. Ruben Gutierrez was executed on Wednesday, and I know Ramiro Gonzalez was executed on Wednesday, and of course Allie was here, and so we have a few more lined up. Ruben Gutierrez on July the 16th, Arthur Brown on August the 7th, Travis Mullis on September the 24th, Garcia Glenn White on October the 1st, and we have another one on February the 5th, Stephen Long. And so thank you guys, for continuing the fight with us, and thank you for being there and fasting. I always like to tell the story that I had never fasted in my whole life, and when I got there and I heard my stomach grumble, and I told SueZann that I heard my stomach grumble, and I had never heard that before. But I know you guys are fasting. I know it's hot, and I just want you to be sure and take care of each other and drink plenty of fluids and get some rest. And I love you all very much, and my brother loved you all very much. And Gloria is here. Want to say hello?
Yeah, I wanted to say hello to everybody and thank you for being there. I wanted to give the phone number to the Texas governor,
Somebody write this down.
Greg Abbott. His number is 512-463-2000. 512-463-2000. You can talk to somebody during the day. You can leave a message 24 hours a day. They have to tally these phone calls. So just call and demand that he stop these killings. And thanks to all of you for being there.
Hey, Gloria, do you know, do they, can we know how many calls are being generated? Is that reported somewhere, that's those tallies?
It is, and I've never done it. I just remember before Kenneth Foster got his sentence commuted in 2007, somebody posted those tallies. So I don't know if you have to do freedom of information or if they just tell you. I'm not sure.
All right, well, we'll put somebody on there. And Gloria, thank you also for your leadership, your consistent presence outside the prison at every execution there in Texas, and all of your longevity with this work. One of these days, we hope you come up to the Bastion Vigil.
Well, okay. I witnessed my friend's Carlos Santana's execution in 1993. This was a law parties case. He didn't kill anybody. And this was before the victim's family also witnessed. So we were in the same room, like 6 feet apart, talking until they killed him. And the last thing Carlos told me was, Gloria just made me one promise. And I said, anything. He said, promise you'll never stop fighting the death penalty. And I am a person that keeps my promises to my friends. So I'm not going to stop as long as I'm alive and as long as the death penalty is alive. And I hope you guys a slow, painful death very soon.
Amen to that. Delia, any final thoughts before we, y'all can continue to watch online if you want.
I just wanted to say thanks and that I love you all very, very much, and so did my brother, and his spirit is with us and always will be, and we're just so grateful to you all for being there. I know it's hot, and I wish I could be there with you, but I am with you in spirit.
As you have been in person many times before, so one day you'll come back.
Yeah, give Arndt a big hug for me, because I know they're going to be cooking in that kitchen tonight. And hopefully I'll be back to make arroz con pollo someday soon.
Oh, well, the cooking isn't until Tuesday night, but we're all looking forward to that. So,
Okay, so.
all right, thank you, Delia.
Okay.
We love you.
Love
All right, now Rob Dunham is our next speaker, and he has a hard act to follow. Come on up, Rob. Rob is the former director of Death Penalty Information Center, but the present creator of
the Death Penalty Policy Project.
the Death Penalty Policy Project.
So everything I planned to say just went out the window. Let me start with where Louis's case ends. We are currently at 199 death row exonerations. 199. And there have been 1,500, what's the number on that thing now? 91?
1591.
1,591 executions. If we do the math and we count Louis's case at 200 exonerations, and if it's not going to be Louis's case, it'll be somebody else's very soon. We're looking at one exoneration for every 7.95 people who are executed. Now, I remember not too long ago, we were talking about one for every 10. And then we were talking about one for every 9. And then we're talking about one for every 8. It is less than that now. So it doesn't take much to understand that the death penalty is broken. The death penalty is not even good at accurately identifying the people who should be convicted. And we know beyond that, that it is not very good, even when you're convicted, at identifying the people who should, if you ever believe anyone should, be sentenced to death. We don't have to look past last week and Ramiro Gonzalez's case to know that. For Ramiro Gonzalez, the only thing that made him eligible for the death penalty was a finding by the jury that he posed a continuing threat to society. If the jury had not made that finding, there were no what you call aggravating circumstances. There was nothing that would make him eligible for the death penalty. And obviously, it's illegal, it's immoral, it's unethical, it's unconstitutional to execute somebody when there is no basis for the execution. So what happened in Texas? Ramiro Gonzalez goes to trial, and in his trial, a psychiatrist hired by the prosecution offers testimony in the penalty phase of his case that there is a greater than 80% likelihood that he will be a repeat offender, sex offender and murderer, if he is not sentenced to death. That is scientifically false. That is completely inaccurate by any study, and it's a lie. And it was intentionally presented by the prosecution, and that was, if not the sole evidence, that was the main evidence that led the jury to conclude that Ramiro Gonzalez was eligible for the death penalty. So he was sentenced to death on a lie. He was sentenced to death when he was not eligible for the death penalty. And he had appointed lawyers who didn't know what they were doing. So they failed to raise the issue at the right time. New lawyers came into the case who knew what they were doing. And they raised the issue. And they went to the Texas trial court. And they went to the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. And they said, under the new law passed by the Texas legislature, we are entitled to have a conviction or death sentence overturned if there is new scientific evidence that the evidence presented in the case was false. Ramiro Gonzalez got a death warrant. And shortly before he was scheduled to be executed, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals said, stop. We're going to send this case back to the trial court so the trial court can decide the issue about whether the death sentence was based on false evidence. We're not going to let them decide the second question that the defense asked, which was the jury's determination accurate? So you don't get to decide that. You can only decide whether it's based on false evidence. That was very important in this case because the defense got the prosecution psychiatrist to re-examine Ramiro Gonzalez 2 decades after he was sent to prison and lo and behold had never been a danger to anybody. The prosecution expert recanted. So not only was his testimony false as a matter of science, it was completely disavowed. We now know, based on that there is no evidence that the jury could have based a judgment of future dangerousness on. So Ramiro Gonzalez is not eligible for the death penalty. The case goes back to the trial court. A visiting judge is brought in to the case. And the prosecution submits a brief with its version of the facts and its proposed fact findings and its proposed conclusions of law. And without allowing the defense to present any evidence, the judge rubber stamps that order, signs it verbatim, and denies relief. And the case goes back up to the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals with a bad judgment based on no hearing at all, when all the evidence shows that there was false testimony that led to the death sentence, and there is no evidence that is reliable at all on which anybody could conclude that Ramiro Gonzalez was going to be a danger to anybody. Texas Court of Criminal Appeals upholds the trial court's ruling. Ramiro's lawyers file another set of claims.
All the evidence shows that there was false drug.
Do I sound like that? The case goes back into court. And the Texas court says, no, we're not going to hear it. We're not going to hear it. So it goes up to the United States Supreme Court, new death warrant. It goes up to the United States Supreme Court. Defense counsel raises a claim that this has got to be a violation of due process and the Eighth Amendment for the Texas courts to not even hear this issue. And because there is something called an original writ of habeas corpus. You know we're in trouble when we're talking in Latin, right? But there's this thing called an original writ of habeas corpus, which allows the United States Supreme Court to step in when you're out of time in all the other courts. Actual innocence. Now, actual innocence isn't what you and I would think it is, right? Actual innocence to us is the guy didn't do it, right? Or there's no basis at all to say that a death penalty should be imposed in this case. Actual innocence for the Supreme Court is that there is no evidence upon which any reasonable juror could have imposed the death penalty or voted to convict. Nobody has ever won in a capital case on this original writ of habeas corpus. But there has been Troy Davis, where the court said, at least we're going to take a look at it. So what happens in Ramiro Gonzalez's case? The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals does nothing. Nope, we're not going to hear it at all. And the United States Supreme Court refuses to hear the case. And so a man who was not eligible for the death penalty was executed without any process to review the evidence that would have demonstrated that he was sentenced to death based on a lie. The death penalty is not reliable. It is not trustworthy. The courts are not doing justice, and it has to stop. So I wasn't planning on saying any of that. But so I guess you heard it here first. What I did want to talk about was a couple of things that the Death Penalty Policy Project is now working on. Because we are approaching 200 exonerations, I wanted to go back and take a look at what caused these wrongful convictions in the first place. Now, we hear so often from prosecutors that the death penalty is necessary as a bargaining chip, something to get people to admit to things that they wouldn't otherwise admit to, and then we're going to save a lot of time and money and resources, and we're going to solve cases. Well, using a death threat to solve a case isn't particularly a good idea out of this. And if I held a gun to your head, or you held a gun to my head, and you asked me to confess, and I confessed, most of the time, reasonable people would say that is a coerced confession. So the use of the death penalty, which is kind of a delayed murder, to elicit confessions doesn't strike me as something that's reliable, doesn't strike me as a tool that should ever be used. And I've looked at the last 6 years of exonerations that have been listed by the National Registry of Exonerations. And I've gone through all their murder cases. And I've looked at all of the cases in which people were exonerated after they were wrongfully capital prosecuted, or they were threatened with the death penalty, or witnesses in their case were threatened with the death penalty. And as a result of those death threats, innocent people went to jail. In just 6 years, I found more than 70 cases. So we know that the death penalty is a stain on the legal system, not just in cases where innocent people get sent to death row, not just in cases where people who aren't eligible for the death penalty get executed, but in any case, any type of case, in which it is used as a negotiating tool or an interrogation tactic. It is something that is bad for our legal system, period. Just having the death penalty increases the risk that innocent people will go to jail, that innocent people will be condemned, and that innocent people will be killed. Having said that, what does the evidence show in the death penalty exoneration cases? The single most common cause, the single most prevalent factor in producing a wrongful conviction that puts somebody on death row is official misconduct. The second most prevalent factor is perjury or false accusation. Official misconduct is present in more than 3/4 of the death penalty exonerations. Perjury is present in about 2/3. And when you put the two of them together and you ask, well, is there perjury or misconduct or both? 84% of the death row exonerations. People don't get wrongly convicted and sent to death row by accident. This is a policy that cannot work so long as prosecutors have a benefit that they can get for using the death penalty. So long as the legal system does not do its job to correct these errors. And we have seen with this current court, right across, I guess it's this way from us, that this current court is not going to do anything about it. So who will? And that's you. And that's you in every county and every state. And that's you protesting every execution. And that's you making sure that people know that the death penalty is not fair, has never been fair, and we cannot trust the government with it because they will not get it right. So this is 52 years after Furman versus Georgia. The experiment has failed, and it's time that we end that experiment once and for all. Thank you.
There's a question from somebody watching on Facebook.
Probably my wife.
Sandra says, when is there going to be a time when these individuals, as judges, prosecutors, etc., that do these things and allow these things to happen, but things that can change, these wrongful convictions where they need sometimes where they didn't know, when will they be held accountable for these gross miscarriages of justice? And when they do that, I believe some of these things would stop. But when will we see accountability?
Currently, and I don't mean to be flippant.
Can you repeat the question for those on the
Okay. When will those prosecutors and judges and others in the system who allow these wrongful convictions and wrongful executions to go forward, when will they be held accountable? And I was going to say I don't mean to be flippant, but I think I actually do. And that is Judgment Day. At this point, there is nothing in the United States judicial process that is holding people accountable. There have been a handful of prosecutors who have been disciplined. 1 or 2 have been disbarred. But normally it is many years afterwards, after they have gotten the rewards from wrongful convictions. I can't tell you how many prosecutors who won Prosecutor of the Year awards in their state were later found to have won those convictions that got them those rewards by lying and cheating and violating people's constitutional rights. I can't tell you how many of the prosecutors have gone on to higher office, how many became judges, some on Supreme Courts of states, and some have risen to the United States Senate. So until there is something in place that removes those rewards or removes the policy that allows them to get those rewards, then we're not going to be able to meaningfully address that issue. I think it's incumbent upon all of us, though, to continue to make as much noise as possible about these issues, armed with as much data as possible.
Other questions?
Anybody have another question for Rob? All right.
Any predictions?
Any prediction? I will invoke Yogi Berra, as I always do, and ask this question. I don't make predictions, especially about the future. I mean, as a practical matter, the place that change is going to happen is at the state level and at the county level. The county level change, obviously the counties don't make the law, but the counties have the prosecutors who exercise the discretionary choice as to whether to seek the death penalty or not. And when they come in, they have the discretionary choice about whether to defend unjust death sentences. So to clear death row as much as possible, the most important place to do that is at the ballot box at the county level when it comes to prosecutors' elections and judicial elections. Too often we see, when we look at the judiciary, locally elected judges elected at the county level are coming out of the prosecutor's office, not out of the public defender's office, or not out of the civil rights law firm's office. And as a result, they are part of the culture, whether they themselves are part of the problem in that they produce unconstitutional convictions, death sentences themselves. Sometimes that's true, sometimes it's not. But even in the best of circumstances, they are part of the culture. And until we change the culture of the courts, I don't think we're going to be successful in changing the outcome of the cases that goes before those courts. The other locus of change, I used some Latin earlier, so I'll get away with locus, is the state legislatures, right? And that is abolishing the death penalty. We have a direction of change that we're seeing in this country. We were at 38 states with the death penalty. We are now at 27 states with the death penalty. There are 3 with moratoria on executions. There are a couple of other states that don't really have moratoria, but they have governors who, for one reason or another, are not going forward with executions. Right? In a majority of states, there really is no death penalty anymore. We need to go after all the other ones that are left. And Virginia abolished the death penalty. If Virginia can abolish the death penalty, Ohio can abolish the death penalty, Pennsylvania can abolish the death penalty, and if we can get legislators elected in other states, then we can do it in Georgia, we can do it in Texas, we can do it anywhere. But that's where the change has to happen.
It's great to see you here again. Definitely a fan of your work, student of your work.
Thank you.
Obviously, you know, Project 2025 is on the horizon. What do you say if Trump gets elected, puts Nikki Haley as number 2, Project 2025 is successful? What do you say to that?
What's going to happen if Project 225 which is from the Heritage Foundation, it gets put into effect. For those who don't know, the Heritage Foundation and a number of hard right organizations have produced a criminal justice, not just outline, extensive book on what they think a second Trump administration should do. And when it comes to the death penalty, what they have said that the Congress should do and the next president should do is expand the crimes for which the death penalty can be imposed, banking on this United States Supreme Court overturning past precedent that has limited the death penalty to crimes involving murder. And they want to clear death row in the name of justice, which means executing as many people as they can, as quickly as they can. I think that proposal is morally bankrupt. I think that proposal is based on a political fiction. They say it's necessary to deter crime and to stop the current surge in violent crime. Now, the fact of the matter is there is no current surge in violent crime. We are returning to the record low levels of violent crime that we had before the pandemic, and the death penalty has never deterred anything. Let alone, does the death penalty deter better than a substantial prison term, even one that's short of life without possibility of parole? There is no evidence whatsoever that the death penalty contributes in any manner to public safety. None. So I think it's an atrociously bad idea. And it's obviously something that if President Biden or another Democrat retains office, is not going to go into effect. It does underscore something else that I think is extremely important, though, which is the President of the United States has wide discretion when it comes to issuing commutations. And so if Donald Trump wins the election, President Biden has a choice that he can make and has to make about how he wants to be remembered in history. If he does nothing, he will be the president that permitted a slaughter on federal death row. I think that Joe Biden is a decent man, and I don't think he will do that. I don't think he will allow that. His alternative is to commute death row. That's something that I don't expect to see the president do or even think about before the election. And so I don't think that there'll be anything we see at that point. But let me also say this. If he wins, he has a new mandate.
Yeah.
And the first 100 days after that election, with that new mandate, is also a perfect time to commute death row.
Yeah.
Makes sense. He can't run again, so.
Yep. Any questions?
Okay, and now we're going to hear from death penalty alternatives for Arizona.
Hi everyone, I love seeing a full room. My name's Kat Jutras. I'm the Advocacy Director for Death Penalty Alternatives for Arizona. I'm here to talk to you about people, not just people on death row, but people who are experiencing pain and violence, and how the death penalty in Arizona doesn't serve us. Arizona is a big state. We're now, I think, the fifth largest, or Phoenix is the fifth largest metropolitan area in the country. So we have a lot of people coming from a lot of places and a lot of people who aren't getting their needs met. We've got 113 people on death row in Arizona, and it is very expensive to have capital punishment in Arizona. I started this work 3 years ago, and within 2 months of starting, I lost my first client. His name was Clarence Dixon, and he is a huge portion of our work right now, focused around addressing serious mental illness and those who are living on death row with mental health conditions, also including intellectual disability. When I started this work, I was like, I know the death penalty is wrong, but I did not know how deeply troubling it was that we were neglecting mental illness, we were neglecting folks with learning disabilities. We had people who had no idea what was going to happen to them while they were in prison. Clarence's story haunts me to this day, and it is a big reason why I am fueled on a daily basis to get up and call myself an abolitionist. Clarence's case, and for the last 3 years since his execution, has encouraged us to do a significant amount of research on what kind of mental illness people on the row are experiencing. What did their history look like before ending up in prison? And to know also that our society has failed. Anyone who is in prison is not only there because of their own actions, but the failure of intervention in society. It starts at the school level. It starts outside in churches, in our community, when we're not looking at our neighbors as people. And while I talk a lot about people on the row, I don't say this is a death row prisoner, this is a death row inmate, this is a human being. And oftentimes when we're thinking about this work, we're only thinking about how to save this life and not thinking about the prevention that has to ensure that we're not adding to this row. So what our research has told us, and when I first had learned about Clarence's case, was unfortunately about 30 days before he was going to be executed. Clarence, I have to take you back to 1977 to tell you about Clarence's case and why it's so important. Clarence was arrested for an assault and battery on a woman and was found incompetent at trial. So he was supposed to be sent to a psychiatric facility. Instead of being sent to that psychiatric facility, he was released out to the public without any medication, without any resources, without anything. 48 hours after his release, he committed the homicide that would land him on death row. Because of these failures in our society of recognizing that people need resources, when we are releasing folks back into society from incarceration or hospitalization, Clarence's case was preventable. If we had taken the extra step to make sure he had gotten the medication and hospitalization that he needed. Clarence says, or was a schizophrenic his entire life. He grew up on the Navajo reservation and endured significant abuse. He was eating dog food at one point in his life. And this story is not one for the faint of heart, but it is also one that I read about constantly in all the cases. So many of the people on our row have endured psychological abuse, physical abuse, on top of having mental illness and intellectual disabilities. So when we're thinking about what is the perfect storm that lands a person in prison over and over and over again, we have to go back to the systemic failures in our society that aren't addressing these underlying causes. So while we do a lot of education about what our row is and the composition and the legal arguments, we have to start talking about what the real alternatives to the death penalty are, and that's addressing the needs of people who aren't in prison now. It's addressing mental illness, it's ensuring that we have education, and it's ensuring that people know that another person out there might need a friendly face, might need that person to lift them up today, might need a hug, might need just one person to ensure them that they are of value and they don't have to go out and do drugs today. They don't have to go out and cause harm to someone else to deal with their pain. So many of the folks that we have had relationship with and built community with who are incarcerated tell us what happened. What happened to them as a child, what happened to them from being adopted from another country and being a member of a family of 9 and feeling lost and never getting the support to deal with the abuse they experienced in an adoption agency, to being sexually assaulted as a child and dealing with that by perpetuating harm to others. While none of these are justifications for crime, it reminds us how victimization, untreated, can lead to victimization of others. We want to make sure all victims of crime always are heard and always receive the services they need to heal, and that's not happening in Arizona. What's happening is people are being perpetually punished by systems that don't work. And we also know that all this money that we're wasting on the death penalty in Arizona, hundreds of millions of dollars could be reinvested into making communities safer, providing essential services for survivors of crime, and ultimately really addressing the underlying issues of why violence happens. That's not happening. And that's why we're fighting every day to ensure that our governor, our legislators are all informed, and of course the general public know what we're trying to do here. Abolition is not just opening the doors and releasing people out into society. It's addressing really why crime happens, why violence happens, and really why we need to do better. Not as just a political party, but as people who really need to value each other. One aspect of our work in talking about mental illness and also doing a significant amount of research is what would happen if we got rid of the death penalty? What would convince others to join our cause? And one thing that we found was there are a lot of people in Arizona suffering because they don't have answers. Cold cases that are going unsolved. Missing people who have no resources, and families who don't have those support systems to help them find their loved one or find some kind of closure. Arizona is the second in the nation for the highest missing persons in the country, with $119 million, which is the low-end estimate for how much it's cost to imprison 112, 113 people on death row. Imagine what $119 million could do for families who are grieving. Mm-hmm. What could that do for law enforcement agencies who need resources to find missing people and solve cold cases? What could that do? Well, we asked law enforcement agencies. We talked to them, we reached out and said, what would you do with all that money? And they told us how much they needed. In 5 counties, $1 million could fund them for upwards of 5 years. That's one death penalty case in Arizona, one. And we have 50 in the pipeline in Maricopa County alone. So while we're thinking about continuing punishment, we're also continually punishing families who haven't been given resources. We're continually not coming up with solutions to address systemic causes of crime. We're not thinking about what real solutions look like, and that's what our work is focused on in Arizona right now. Well, yes, we want to serve and educate the public on the death penalty. We also have to remind folks that the death penalty doesn't serve anyone but a very vengeful, bloodthirsty system that is encouraged to kill for financial gain. We know that Arizona spent $1.5 million during COVID when our budget was in the rears to buy lethal injection drugs. We know that during COVID, the state decided to refurbish our gas chamber instead of providing essential services to Arizonans who were struggling to put food on the table. So we know that the state is not looking in our best interest. They're looking at the interest of punishment. And no one's tables were fuller because of the execution of Clarence. No one was safer because Clarence was executed. And Clarence, unfortunately, followed Frank Atwood, who had entirely rehabilitated himself and become a symbol of faith in the Greek Orthodox community. And then followed Murray Hooper, who for 40 years maintained his innocence and DNA went untested in his case. Those three gentlemen were no longer threats to society. Murray had been incarcerated for almost 40 years before his execution. And Arizona is no safer without them in it. Instead, we have to keep on encouraging people to hear us, see us, recognize people as people, and know that we can reduce violence, we can reduce crime, we can make Arizona a safer state to be in if we divest from a punishment system that doesn't serve us. We know it doesn't. We know Arizonans need groceries on their tables and essential services. We know that people who experience violence, right now, victim services are only $25,000 for their entire life. That's all they can access.
Crazy.
And missing people in cold cases very rarely are able to access those resources. So our work is vital. It's incredibly important. We also serve those on death row through our Reading on the Row program. So we have very avid readers, folks who are learning different languages, who are going to college, who are constantly working to better and rehabilitate themselves despite the system that they're in, not encouraging that. We value people no matter what at DPAA, and we encourage very much the growth and rehabilitation of people no matter what. As part of our program, any book that's requested is fulfilled by us and returned. We have 25 participants right now in our program. It's been a year and a half with one of our star readers, if I can call him that, reading 120 books a year. So I personally am very excited when I say that I know rehabilitation works for people who want to rehabilitate themselves. I have a list of people who I would let be my neighbors. No problem, no doubt. Because I know that they're thoughtful and caring and have worked incredibly hard to change who they were to be better people today. They've accepted responsibility. They constantly work to better themselves and support the men around them. And also the women on our row are teaching re-entry programming. Imagine being someone waiting for death and having the courage to help rehabilitate other women on your maximum security yard, knowing you will never leave. If that's not a demonstration of what rehabilitation can look like when they are provided resources, I don't know what is. So while we continue our work, I know everyone here, I'm preaching to the choir. I know you're on board with us. I'm excited to have shared my work with you, and our work continues to grow. We just onboarded our victim outreach coordinator. We're very excited to announce our Restorative Justice Coalition. So we're constantly expanding our work and opportunities to grow and educate others on what real transformative justice might look like, and ultimately what justice really should look like in Arizona. We've been fortunate to have Governor Hobbs pause executions. Thankfully, when she was elected, praise be, we have not had executions for 2 years. Now, we do have an attorney general who announced recently that she is planning to resume executions next year. Everything hinges on, one, people being active and motivated and lobbying and helping us advocate for continued pause in executions, but also a report that has been issued by an independent commissioner to review our death penalty protocols. Arizona's not the best state when it comes to doing things legally. We like to find loopholes. We've had lethal injection drugs imported from India, from a driving school. In case you need some lethal injection drugs from a driving school, I don't think any of us would think that's a reputable source, and also from India directly. both of which were not allowed to be used, and we have secrecy laws that do not allow us to get any information on how drugs are procured or who are part of execution teams or what their qualifications are. And unfortunately, in all 3 executions, there were issues with the procedure, and I think that has shown and demonstrated to the governor that we can't continue executions in Arizona. That being said, we need as much support as possible to encourage our Attorney General, who has the power to move executions forward, to not do that. Arizona has had a troubled past, and for 8 years before executions restarted, we didn't have them because they were so badly botched. And an execution that should have taken 15 minutes, it took almost 2 hours. So we are not a state that should be killing anybody, but we are a state that can do better. And we constantly need to be reminded by constituents that we need to do better, we need to be better. We should not have the lowest education ranking in the country. We should not be the 2nd highest rate of missing persons. We also have one of the highest rates in the country for missing, murdered, and Indigenous people, and it's not acceptable. So our work is to uplift the needs of those who need the most and to support those who need the most support when it comes to ensuring they have resources to rehabilitate themselves and also capacity to outreach to those that they love. That's what our work looks like. I'm happy to answer any questions or thoughts that you might have about Arizona. I know there's folks here from other states, but that's kind of what's been going on. We're grateful to be in a pause. It's not a moratorium. I think our governor would never call it a moratorium, so I was very glad to hear Rob say that. Everything will hinge at the end of the year on a report and on our advocacy. We've been fortunate to have meetings with legislators who are really, really excited about the idea of divesting. We've got law enforcement agencies that are interested in funding being diverted from the death penalty into resources for them to help survivors of crime and close old cases. Yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay.
Could you talk more about what is a pause? Is that just the governor saying we're not going to do it now, and why would she do that? And the district attorney, or I mean the attorney general, said, does she have more power over it than the governor?
Yeah, so great question. Executions in Arizona are very political, as they are everywhere. But for Governor Hobbs, I think the direction she's chose to use the pause because it would be weaponized against her otherwise. If she instated a moratorium, I think it would cause significant political damage. Given that Arizona is on paper is a very dominant victims' rights state. Well, they say they are, and in practice, I don't think so. The Attorney General is the person who has the most power when it comes to issuing warrants of execution. We've had some issue, and there's currently a legal battle going on with our county attorney trying to gain power and the ability to issue warrants and move those forward. It's at our state Supreme Court. It'll probably be escalated to that. But the Attorney General has been waiting for the protocol procedure report. And hopefully, she's publicly said they're ready to resume executions next year, but depending on what that report says, and some of the preliminary information we have on that report is that Arizona has so many failures that hopefully there's reason not to move forward with executions next year.
Okay. I think we need to take a slight break bathroom break. For those who don't know, the bathrooms are down the hallway and all the way around, and you'll see the men's and the women's room. And we'll just take a break for a few minutes, if that's okay.
Actually, it'd be better during the interest of time. If you need to go, go. And we've got a lot of other speakers, so we want to make sure that.
Kendall
Count a
McBroom.
round of applause.
Okay, there was a question from,
Oh, I had a question. Clarence was part of the Navajo Nation, so I was just wondering if there was support from the Navajo Nation or other indigenous groups in Arizona against the execution.
Yeah, there's quite a few indigenous nations in Arizona. All but 2 are, I believe, opposed to executions. So yes, there was definitely pushback from indigenous communities, and executions are just not something that, it's not an option for many of those nations. So yes, I think we continue to build relationship. We've recently launched a campaign called Death Fund Justice, working more specifically with missing, murdered, and indigenous communities because they lack the most resources in Arizona. Unfortunately, I think they're just as much in need of resources as we are when it comes to issues and dealing with violence. But there is, I think, a large amount of support for people who are looking for alternative punishments and are not supportive of executions.
thank you. I want to invite Kendall McBroom. Is he here? Kendall? Ah, here he is. Kendall is the, he's bringing greetings from our host, the United Methodists.
Good evening. Good evening. So, as stated, my name is Kendall McBroom. I serve here as the Director of Civil and Human Rights. I've been here now for 2 years. Originally from North Carolina, served as a pastor of a local church in that Piedmont region, High Point to be exact. But I remember when I first got hired in March of 22, there were some things going on, but one of the first introductions and indoctrinations to the work was this group. That was the first summer that I was here. So I've been grateful to be with you all. I apologize for not getting here on Friday. We're actually doing some things with my family, health things. So I wasn't able, but I wanted to be sure before the weekend got on, before you all got to rolling in your many things, to come bring greetings from the agency, from this building, this historic, which you all have participated in and been a part of for over 3 decades now, right? So you're familiar, many of you, and if you're new to it, just an overview. This is the United Methodist Building. We're celebrating 100 years this year. We just got back from Charlotte in April at our general conference, where we have, I believe, up for a significant amount of time, and then we updated some of the language to show our commitment as a faith community to abolishing the death penalty and seeing the death penalty. Seeing it as not only torturous, but beyond, if you will, human oversight and human control. This is not to decree and demand the death of one person due to them taking, or whatever the case may have been, someone else is outside of our control. That is for God to do and for God to handle. If anything we are to do is to restore, to heal, to offer and extend that grace that we receive from the divine. So we are in community with you. We are standing in solidarity with you, and hope and pray that everything this week will go not only great and wonderful, but it will impact those that are on that side and on this side as well as in, I heard the gentleman speak earlier regarding state legislatures. And I think we must be really, really mindful of what is taking place in state legislatures, and really bring and be that voice in our state capitals, in our counties, and as well as here on Capitol Hill. So I just want to affirm and encourage and let you know that there are faith communities. There are, contrary to what can be heard on certain news channels and what can be heard or read in certain newspapers, and what can be even seen or in certain spots of the nation, there are individuals who have faith and are members of the faith community that believe in justice and believe that Jesus himself was executed wrongly convicted and wrongly executed. But there's power, of course, as a Christian preacher, you have to bring the good news about that death could not hold him down. And so even in hearing you talk about Clarence and how even past physical death, his life, his witness, and his story is still in this atmosphere and in this space. So thank you all for the work that you do. I will be with you tomorrow and Tuesday. And just hope that you have a wonderful, wonderful, and impactful and transformative experience in this space and in this gathering.
Thank you.
Oh, okay, I did not mean to do that.
Sorry, okay, Ross.
He stepped outside. Okay, we're going to move from the West Coast back to the East Coast, and we've got the Reverend Hillary Taylor, who directs South Carolinians for Alternative Faith Death Penalties. Come on.
A quick break into song. I did this last year, and I think that this is just going to be my nice refrain that I do whenever people just need a song break. So if you'll follow my not quite solfege, for those of you who are music nerds, and repeat after me as best as you can. Oh, 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 my friend. Oh, my friend. Everything changes in the end. 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 Again. Oh, oh, my friend. Everything changes in the end. Everything changes in the end. One more time. Oh, oh, my friend. Everything changes in the end. Everything changes in the end. Thank you very much. Friends, my name is Reverend Hillary Taylor. I am a United Methodist minister, so it's nice to be in the home team's house of advocacy. I actually was trained here as a young adult missionary of the United Methodist Church in 2012, and so this place has a lot of fondness for me. It trains some of the most radical humans into social justice seekers and change makers. So last year I talked a little bit about SCADP. Our mission obviously is to abolish the death penalty and to catalyze criminal justice reform in South Carolina. We do that through 4 main action steps. First, we rehumanize those who are on death row by telling their stories, retelling their stories, making sure that they are not defined by the worst day of their lives, the worst thing that they ever did, the worst thing that ever happened to them. Next, once we restore these folks, remind people that they were first likely victims of somebody else's violence, and they were probably somebody who reminds you of your brother, your uncle, your father, your neighbor in the church pews, your neighbor down the street. Once we rehumanize our own selves by connecting with them through compassion, we mobilize with local communities by educating them about South Carolina's death penalty past and present, the ways that it has been extremely oppressive and discriminatory, the ways that it is currently discriminatory and oppressive. Next, we advocate. We connect these mobilized communities in advocacy.
with power holders and stakeholders, local politicians, business leaders, prosecutors, and we equip them to say, hey, person in power, I do not want my resources to go towards the death penalty. I want my resources as a taxpayer, as a citizen of this area, to be given towards life-giving opportunities, life-giving, things and programs. And then finally, once we do all of this work, we also sort of bring it back and we restore people who are impacted by violence, by murder, to a place of healing and stability by connecting them to different service providers, either through mutual aid or more official means, and also making available opportunities for them to tell their stories. So if you're engaging in one of these things, it's likely you're engaging in all four of these because it sort of functions as a web. That's what we like to think of our action steps as. And if you care about people on death row, you also have to care about victims. So that is something that we also try to make sure. Speaking of murder victim family members connected to our movement, I want you to check out Sister Helen Prejean's Facebook page today. She reposted an article that appeared in February by somebody who is connected to our movement, a woman named Sharon Hartness, who some of you with the Journey of Hope have had the pleasure of meeting. She is somebody whose sister was murdered in a total stranger danger fluke in the 1970s. And for decades, Sharon never had support, never was able to talk to anybody about her sister's murder. Her family was not equipped to talk about it. There were no victim services at that point in time in South Carolina. Her husband and other, neighbors, families, they never made space. And in the last 6 or 7 years, she has really found her voice. And she has come out to say, I am against the death penalty. The death penalty did no favors for me. In fact, it made it harder for me to talk about my pain because there was a shame connected to my story and to my sister's murder and to the murder of her boyfriend who was also murdered with her. So I share that to say, go and check it out. Her story is important and is reflective of so many other murder victim family members who say that the death penalty does not create healing, it creates more harm. In this past year, there have been some other developments that have happened across South Carolina. When I came here last, we had talked about how there is now a secrecy law in South Carolina when it comes to lethal injection. We now no longer know what the state of South Carolina is paying for lethal injection drugs. We now no longer know who they are buying drugs from. We now no longer know what their protocols or procedures. We never really knew that, but now we definitely have that in stone, that is not available for us, or any of the kind of training that corrections officers have when they are supposed to give lethal injection. These are not medical trained professionals at all. They are corrections officers. So we are traumatizing people, with this entire process who have we're never supposed to be equipped to do any of this. But what's even more draconian, more harmful, is that anybody who perchance gives any of these state secrets to the public can be incarcerated in the state of South Carolina for up to 5 years. Right? So much for being controlled, by a political party that claims to be a freedom caucus, right? Freedom for what? Freedom for what? Now, having said that, I will also say that as a state group, and like many other state groups and national groups, we have a diverse coalition, people from all sides of the political ideological spectrum. We do have people who are a part of the Freedom Caucus. And we also have people who are yellow dog Democrats, have been always, and will be until the day they die. And some of the things that we have been doing is building relationships with different kinds of legislators. It's not a lot. I'm only one person in the state of South Carolina, but what I have learned from people who are our allies is that there are three kinds of legislators in the Republican Party. You have the people who are outwardly against the death penalty, always have, always will be, and are not afraid of that. Unfortunately, in the last decade, the number of those kinds of Republican legislators has diminished somewhat. Those people have left office to pursue other things in this climate. The second category are legislators who are Republican, who are against the death penalty, but they don't know how many of their peers are also against the death penalty. And so they're quiet for a reason, because they also have other things they want to get past. And if we help them to know each other and what each thinks about the death penalty, and my assumption is that there are probably more people who are against the death penalty and they just don't talk about it. You know, if we help them to sort of share the knowledge, that they might be able to organize with us and work with us. And then finally, you do have people who are against the death penalty, but for the sake of clinging to power, they vote for it, they promote it. And some of these people are actually quite powerful, and this is what I have learned in my role as the executive director of South Carolinians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty. And so my hope for the rest of this year, before the next legislative season starts, is that I can sit down and have a conversation with these folks, hopefully with a murder victim family member, hopefully with somebody like Demetrius Snyder from Conservatives Concerned, who can say, hey, this doesn't align with our personal values, right? Our values of, you know, pro-life, you know, ethics, right? Our value as people who are evangelical Christians and care about what Scripture says about God's grace, even when people deserve punishment. That's a whole other thing that I could get to, and I'm sure other pastors who've been on this stage can certainly preach about, and happy to do that later if that's required. But also help people to know that if you don't trust the government to deliver your mail on time, then why would you trust the government with your life? Right? So that is some of the relationship building work that we are doing right now with the people who are in charge of South Carolina politics. There's other stuff too that we are doing. You've heard me talk about the story of George Stinney Jr., who is the youngest person to be executed in the state of South Carolina. And he was a black 14-year-old child who was accused of murdering 2 young white children. And really the only evidence tying him to this crime was the fact that he was the last person to see them alive. Unfortunately, it's very likely that the person who actually murdered these 2 children is the one who accused George Stinney Jr. of doing this murder. This year is the 80th anniversary of his execution. And if you're not familiar with the story, he was arrested, tried, convicted, and executed within 83 days. Jesus. Right? Horrific. Awful. He was born the same year as Helen Keller and Martin Luther King Jr. And so it begs the question, what could he have become if this had never happened? Right? Even people who come from Clarendon County, South Carolina, have a purpose and a hope and a dream. And we live in a state right now, and certainly this is not the only state, where pieces of history like George Stinney's story are actively being suppressed and erased. We have a state superintendent of education who recently announced that South Carolina was no longer going to do AP African American history in schools. And so it is important for South Carolinians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty to be a voice that says there's racial discrimination that is happening actively right now. It has happened in our past. And we certainly have other instances where people were executed and innocent as well. I told you last year about how we are recruiting law students to do some work on other wrongful convictions and wrongful executions. That work persists and it's going well. And I hope that we'll be able to do some other really creative reporting opportunities like the ones that have come out of Texas and also Ohio. So be on the lookout for that in the next couple of years. If you know of any people who have some fantastic graphic design backgrounds, I'm in need of some fantastic volunteers who can do that for me. And let's see here. In terms of grassroots things, and also legislative things, I want to end on these 2 things. So on the grassroots, last year I talked about how we were doing a more in-depth partnership with the Journey of Hope. Last year we had 7 events, so a smaller journey for sure, but it also allowed us to connect with about 315 people total with all of our speakers combined, and that is just really fantastic. It's also allowed us to showcase 4 death row survivors' stories that we have, and they continue to be working with us. Some of them are more available than others based on their jobs. Unfortunately, our state has not equipped them to have a lot of economic opportunities once they have left. But they are people who are surviving and are extremely resilient, and it is my commitment as SCADP's executive director to make space for them to tell their stories so that we can abolish the death penalty once and for all. Because it is only through their stories will we be able to do this. So I invite you to come to South Carolina to work with us or to visit us or to help support us any way you would like. Whether it's through the journey or through some other volunteer opportunity. Know that I live in Greenville, South Carolina, and am always available for a meeting or conversation. The final thing that I want to share is on a legislative level. We've taken some time, and I've been doing this work for about 3 years now, and we've taken some time to try and figure out who are the people that we need to be connected to. We've done some more relationship building, often with litigators and often with people who are in the reentry space. We know we have a lot more connections to make, certainly when it comes to the racial justice and other kinds of social justice causes spaces. But we have formed a South Carolina Justice Partners Coalition. I am now heading that up, which means that anti-death penalty work is part of our focus. It's not just something that's on the fringes of criminal legal reform in South Carolina. Now, we haven't always been very organized in criminal legal reform spaces and legislative spaces. That's going to change now. And we have a lot of support and interest and buy-in from some other groups that have just been waiting for this opportunity, waiting for somebody to say, here I am, send me. Let's figure out a way to connect and work together and make change. So our priorities for the next year are going to be reform around wrongful convictions. South Carolina still has a lot of work to do when it comes to preventing wrongful convictions. And so we have some friends of ours who are litigators in North Carolina who've given us some suggestions and will be sending us some example statutes of what they have done in North Carolina. We're also looking to ban the box statewide in South Carolina. So that is a thing that is, as we do anti-death penalty work, we're also casting a vision for other kinds of criminal legal reform, helping out other people so that they will help out us. So we've got those two things. Also, parole reform. We have a probation, pardons, and parole board that is basically not functioning. Last year, of the many thousands of applications that came across their desk, the probation, pardons, and parole board only approved of less than 3.4% of those applications, and that's violent and non-violent, offenders, quote unquote, right? So something is very wrong. A lot of these people in our state government say, we have the best recidivism rates in the country. Well, no wonder we do, because we don't let anybody out in the first place. So we need parole reform. And there are ways we especially need it around people who need compassionate medical release. So looking at that, looking at nominating people who are actually qualified for this job, but also have a lens towards some of the work that we want to do. And the final thing that we really want to do is end juvenile life without parole. That functionally still exists in South Carolina, and it needs to stop because it is creating, again, more harm for people who don't deserve to be in prison for that long. And often people who get into the system for truancy offenses, right? Things like running away from traumatic situations, and yet we're punishing these people who are victims. So this is the work that we are doing in South Carolina. And I'm very grateful to be here to tell this story. And I want to open it up for any questions that people might have.
You're great.
That's easy. Yeah, I know. It's the preaching presence. One more time, we'll do our song we just learned, right? Repeat after me. Oh, 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 my friend.
Oh, my friend.
Everything changes in the end.
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 Thank you, friends.
I don't know if you're hearing what I'm hearing, but there are some recurring themes going on: rehabilitation, restoration, repair. And one of the prime leaders in that work over the years has been Charlie Sullivan, the founder of Citizens United for Rehabilitation of Errants. Right. So Charlie, will you come on up? You got too much in your pack.
Well, yes. Well, I thought about what would be something to think about and what I would wear. So my hat is from Ted Kennedy.
Oh, wow. Cool.
And because I'm not a fan, I wouldn't. I like the Washington Nationals. And then the shirt was given to me by Michael Jewell, who was on death row for many years and made shirts, and you can see it's well made and really beautiful shirt. And he was released when the moratorium on the death penalty came about 50 years ago. Anyway, he is doing fine now. And anyway, he gave me the shirt. And and what I have in the bag are Abe, yeah. For you, Abe. Be sure and look at the book, especially a check.
Thank you.
And, okay, and the, now my wife, who is really, I'm more of her secretary, but she could not make it today. But she is, her picture is on this. This is a one-page newsletter that we did last year, and also has a picture when we started, and we started 52 years ago.
Wow.
Wow.
Amazing.
And when we were about 30, early 30s. And I'll be 84, and she is 86 next month. And so this also tells you about our organization, and this is a picture of one of our first meetings in Austin. We started in Texas. I'm from Alabama, and my wife is from Minnesota. And we got together and we realized that we're former religious. I'm a former priest and she's a former nun. And, we left really when we were just getting our feet wet, really. And then we met, and then we got involved in prison reform. And that's been it. But we were in Texas for 15 years, and from about 72 or whatever, all the way until 85, we were in Texas. So we really, then we came up here to expand our organization nationally. And it is, in regard to the death penalty, it's, you can imagine, I mean, they don't even, we were active back when Dave Clark, who spoke to, you might have been around when he spoke to the group. But Dave Clark was chairman of the city council here in DC and played a major role in keeping the death penalty out of DC. And my wife she'd take the bus over, and for about 6 weeks, we talked about it today, she ended up helping Dave to work on it. And it ended up being about 2 out of 3 people in the district voted against the death penalty. And so that really put it to, it just pretty much stopped it. There is no more concern about the death penalty. I think too, and I look at, I'm, in a way, I feel like I go to this group every year, more or less, but I'm not, because I think if we were in Texas, we would still be very involved. And we're in Washington, and we are also concerned about other states and what they're doing. And also, this talks about something that we're looking at, trying to reach out to Africa. And we had a conference a year ago in Africa, had almost 30 countries. And so we've got a good group going in Africa. We had people from Asia come over to Africa, and also South America. And so my dream is, before we retire or whatever, or die, is that we would have 5 different representatives representing the 5 continents, and be able to, shows that you can, if you are able to keep pushing, and we've got some good leaders in Asia, in Africa, and also I think in South America. But this explains, it's just 1 page, and so if you want to look at this, and if you have any questions, you can. What I'd like to focus on is we had a person on death row in Texas that we were very involved in. In fact, I was present at his execution, and it was still terrible. And that was about the change of the century. That was about 2001, I think, right? Where's Abe, right? That was, about, and that was Billy Hughes. Billy was got a lot of national acclaim for when he was on death row, starting a program where he ended up providing stables for, thank you. Okay. Thank you. Providing stables for people that had horses when they would go to a motel in a state, and they would, what if you had a horse, what do you do? And so he was able to develop a stable guide that people could use throughout the country. And they didn't know that he was doing this from death row. I mean, a lot of people didn't know. But it became just really well. And what I want to do is Lois and Ken Robinson, who also were very involved in this group and also in Texas, had written a note. And but I just want you to, this is Happy Horse, what I keep next to my bed, on the table or whatever, to remember Billy. And he sold a lot of these cards. I don't know, are they still doing that, Abe? Are you still doing Billy's cards?
We've run out. If you have more, we'll do them. We've run out.
Okay. Well, you can see his, this is a card that the Robinsons, who had a son on death row, was executed in Texas. He had, they sent a note to us thanking for a thing that we gave, but they had one of Billy's cards, and you can just, he was very good on death row. And so Billy was from my state of Alabama, from Mobile, Alabama, where I grew up. And of all things, he one evening, it was raining and all, he came in 1976. And he came on Highway 10 coming from Alabama. And he was just, as somebody said about the mentally ill, there's so many people that are mentally ill. And, but two Department of Public Safety officials stopped him and in the rain, and he ended up firing one shot, and he was driving away from them. And that one shot killed one of the Department of Public Safety officers. And I don't know if that was actually happened even to this day. What I think happened is that one of the DPS officers started shooting. One was behind the other, and he shot. I think he shot the person. And this was confirmed to me by his attorney, and he was just a fantastic person. He actually spent more than the years that he was on death row, actually more than in the free world. He died at 48. And there was about a half a dozen of us who went to his execution. I mean, he invited us to come to his execution. And all you have to do is see one, and you'll never forget it. But Billy was had this wonderful hobby where he was able to provide a guide, a stable, and it's really wonderful. I feel that the death penalty, we're not as involved as we were in Texas the first 15 years, as you can imagine, being in D.C. But we do stay and try to contribute to our leader. And so I'll leave it at that unless you have any questions. So we've been involved in prison reform for 52 years. And what do we do? That's the question. How do you get out of it? And also we're spreading it to the world, really. And so that's why we're here, and that's about it.
Thank you for your service first. But what would you say is like the greatest thing that you've learned throughout this process of organizing? I mean, I hope to organize as long as you have. But what any like bits of wisdom you can give to other organizers?
Well, I'll tell you what we've done. I mean, we have not had any where we've had one grant. I think the Sentencing Project gave us a little money to have a program, but in 52 years, we have organized without any grants.
Wow.
And that's something to think about. And we now have money. In fact, I gave back our leader $1,000 from the money that we do have from gifts and different things. And that's how we are able, and many of our members are people who have loved ones on death row. I mean, they don't feel like people are doing things for them. They've got to, you know, it's very difficult. You can imagine, here we are, ex-priests, ex-nun, and we're in our earlier 30s, and what do? You know, and we, of all places, Texas. And so if we spent 15 years in Texas, and so really the worst place for the death row, the death penalty, and then go to Washington, which is not even discussed, the death penalty. But we've been able, even nationally and whatever, we have not had any grants or whatever to do that. I don't think we could touch all the things we're supposed to do the grants or whatever, but we raised the money. In fact, of all things, the Catholic Church has been probably our biggest support. I think many people that are in the Catholic Church had decided that everybody went through a crisis in the early 70s. I think because of the Vatican II Council, that had a lot to do with it. And we just, you know, Alabama was, I ended up speaking out there, and that was the first time. And, but we decided to get a neutral place because Pauline is, well, she's one of 13 children. And she has 7 brothers. Let's see, 7 or 8. But anyway, 2 of the brothers had threatened us because we had left the Catholic Church, and also we were involved against the war and all of that. But we decided that we couldn't organize in Alabama or in Minnesota, but to be in Texas, we thought, where there really was needed an organization. In fact, of all things, we received $100,000 recently from the people who were against us in Texas. And they were then in the Attorney General's office. That's why we could help you. And they said, well, we wanted you still doing it. We want to give you money. And we said, oh. So, I mean, they had come to that point that they had realized that they had been on the side of the state in regard to a big lawsuit against the Department of Corrections that we really won on. And we had a fantastic judge whose name really exemplifies his leadership and all. Judge William Wayne Justice. He was, and any attorney will know about William Wayne Justice because he's wonderful. Let's see. I think that may be it. And
Yeah. Well, let's give Kelly a big I can tell you from organizing in Virginia for many years that if you need to find co-conspirators, look up the state chapter of CURE. And in Virginia, we frequently had our lobbying day together with Virginia CURE. And it always worked out well. They have a great group of people.
this is always.
Your Mississippi leader, Sandra Humphrey, is watching online and sends her greetings.
Okay, well, good.
Okay. Well, thank you, Charlie. And now we're going to hear from one of the founders of the Journey of Hope, who's ready to talk. If they can get him out of the chair there. Wait a second, George. I think many of us know George White and have traveled with him. get a chance to hear his story tonight.
Hey, well, I'll start by standing up, but there may come a time where I need to sit down. You can adjust it. If you can't, work on it. I feel like I helped raise this boy.
Yeah.
Of course, he
I'll
came
hold
to
that
me
chair for
earlier, when we confirmed I was speaking tonight, and
You want to sit, George?
no, I'll
No.
stand there. No,
Were you the best man at Abe's wedding?
well.
He was
yeah, but
present,
I
but no.
wasn't technically.
But
But we all knew it. But I was here for that. I've been at, I believe, 28 of these. I missed 3 or 4 for one reason or another. My name is George White, and I'm presently called Northern Virginia home. And if you shoot, how many in here, by show of hands, have never heard me speak in public? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Hey,
We got you a new audience, George.
I believe my role in this movement is I was given a story to tell. And whenever I have an audience that is blessed or cursed to be here, I owe it to that audience to share my story. I am a storyteller, but I was given my life a story to tell, and by God, I'll share it. This then is my story, and again, I was, on February 27th, 1985, I was vice president of an independent chain of building supplies headquartered in Enterprise, Alabama, small city of about 20,000. And on that day, we were living our little piece of the dream. I had a wife, Charlene. I called her Char, and we had 2 small children. Our son Tom was 12, and daughter Christy 5. Char and I were going out to dinner and a movie. At least that was the plan. And I got a call to the house. The call was from a man. I didn't really catch his name, but I got calls from folks all the time, whatever. And he apologized for calling her to the house, said he had kind of an emergency situation. It had a circuit breaker go out, it was hooked up to his freezer. Of course, I mumbled a little under breath and said, call. And then I agreed to go out to the store and meet him there in a few minutes. And I hung up the phone, I told Char, and she said, well, why don't I ride with you? Maybe then you won't get caught up too long and we can make it. She knew me well. We got out there. Wasn't anybody there yet, we went on inside. We were in there maybe 5 minutes when there was a knock at the door. And I went to that door expecting a grateful customer. Instead, we were confronted by a man with a gun. We cooperated. I told Charles, just whatever he says. And I opened the safe. I gave him what was there. I think there was a total of about $1,500, whatever. And then he told us to go out there, and he gestured out to the showroom area where the cash registers were. Of course, I knew there wasn't any money out there, but he had the gun. As we started out, Char was a little bit ahead, and I was a little bit behind her, and he was a little bit behind us. As we approached the door, I started to push it, and I turned to look to see which way he wanted us to go, and Char stumbled. And the first shot was fired. And again, and again, and again, and again. I can still hear the resounding sound of those gunshot. And it's been however many years ago that was now. Char was struck twice I was struck 3 times. My arm, my left leg, and then in the abdomen area. I collapsed. I lost consciousness for at least a few seconds. By the time I came back to myself, he was gone. It was quiet. And then I saw my wife lying face down in a pool of blood. I went to her. There was some plastic up on the Coke machine. I grabbed onto it, and I got down beside her, and I lifted her head to try to stop the flow of blood. And it was then that I saw the shattered remains of her beautiful face. That's it. That's an image that I can never erase from my mind. It was for me the absolute confirmation that some things are beyond explanation and beyond my capacity to endure. Literally, I cursed God at that moment. Char died, obviously. I lived. I called the police, and they came out, and they loaded us up in the ambulance and took us off to the hospital. Char died. Obviously, I lived. But for my children and I and our family, that was just the beginning of the nightmare. 16 months later, I was indicted, arrested, and charged with the capital murder of my wife. I could not believe it. But it happened. I'll try to make this as brief as I can. But like I told Abe, and Abe knows this, if there's one person that hasn't heard the story, well, then I'm obligated to share this story. And by God, I will.
Thanks, George.
I hired a lawyer named Paul Young, country lawyer. I had known Paul slightly, but in a visible way before it all began. Paul was then later appointed to represent me. Alabama didn't have public defenders. Trial, about 14 months later. Meanwhile, I was held without bond in the county jail for 100 days. And then Paul went up on what's called a writ of mandamus, where you seek relief asking a higher court to do what you're obligated to do. And in this case, set a reasonable bond. And a reasonable bond was set. The president of my company, Dale Townsend, posted my bond so I could get out. And we ended up waiting then a total of 16 months to get for trial to begin. Of course, I was still clinging to what I'd been brought up to believe, that once we got to trial, the truth would out and justice would prevail. I knew it couldn't be made right. But we got to trial, and following a 2-week trial, during which the state of Alabama asked a jury to condemn me to death, I was convicted. However, I was lucky. I didn't get a death sentence. I got a sentence of life, which in my estimation was another way of dying day by day by day, but be that as it may. Paul stuck by my side. He filed an appeal and that rocked out. I was incarcerated for 2 years, 103 days, not that I was keeping track. But then on the first appeal, a unanimous decision by the Alabama Court of Criminal Appeals, my conviction was overturned. It was, in the words of the appellate court, the trial had been, quote, a mockery and a sham. That appellate decision goes on to read, the evidence brought against me was weak, minimal, and circumstantial, and appellate court can only marvel that a jury would have convicted this man to begin with. So on a unanimous decision, the conviction was set aside, and I was ordered released on reasonable bond. My sister and her husband, who had taken in the kids, they lived down in Central Florida. They posted bond, and I was released. For the next more than 3 years, there was 16 sessions of criminal court in Coffee County, Alabama. And in each of those sessions, we would appear. And when they announced the state of Alabama, and that's a whole lot of folks lined up against you, by the way. We would stand, Paul and I, and announce present and ready to proceed. The state would say nothing. And over our objection, it was continued beyond that term of court by the trial judge. Finally, it took us going all the way back to the Court of Criminal Appeals on a writ of mandamus. Again, that's higher court orders that the lower court do what it's supposed to do under the law. And of course, the issue we went up on was speedy trial. Well, by God, you at least told me that. Finally, on March 31st, 1992, more than 7 years from the night I was shot, the Alabama Supreme Court ruled that I had been denied a speedy trial, and they ordered the trial court to take me to trial within the next 30 days. Well, I don't know how that's a remedy to lack of speedy trial, set it 30 days down the road, but that's what we were after. But it didn't happen. In all of those years, Paul led the struggle to find the evidence that we knew existed somewhere that would prove my innocence. I tried, by that time I'd become very educated by the law. I'd never really studied the law. I was a business law course when I was a freshman in college, but my degrees were in business management and economics. But there's no preparation you can have for this, except getting a lawyer that would not quit. Finally, I'll try to brief this down. It was through Paul's efforts, most of all, we uncovered 104 separate items of evidence hidden from us for more than 7 years in state files that should have been turned over to us. It was evidence not only exonerating me, proving my innocence, that I could not have done this hopeful crime. But again, it was hidden. We got that. Paul and I went to the district attorney, and 4 men carried boxes. We took things out of those boxes and laid them in front of Mr. Palmer, the district attorney. You'll note I named names. He turned white and then red when he opened up that top folder. That top folder was a letter of reprimand from Dr. Carlos Rayburn, who was the head of the Alabama Department of Forensic Science. It was a letter of reprimand directed to the gun ballistic guy, and it was dated 10 days after my conviction, which by this time was 4.5 years previous or whatever. But for the tragic errors that he made in the evaluation of evidence in the Charlotte White case. And Palmer, well, I've never read this. And Paul, God bless him, said, Joe, I don't give a flying, fill in the first word of the moment, what you say anymore. And it means nothing to us that you're denying ever having seen it. He said, that may be true. You may have had one of your flunkies around here read it to you. But the fact is, Joel, you got 24 hours, and this is over. We got one out of there. We got. I was going to turn to Paul and say, when did we get that power? He said, what? He said, that we could call the end of it. And he laughed. He said, let's see what happens in 24 hours. The next day, we got a call at Paul's office from the bailiff of the judge. Told us to get over there. We started to leave the office, and I turned to Paul's receptionist. I said, call the media and tell them that there's something going on. And Paul and I are on our way across the street to the court. I said, we ain't doing this in the dark anymore. And I looked at Paul, and he nodded, and he said, pay attention to what the man said. We got over there, we went in the courtroom, wasn't anybody there, and then Mr. Palmer came out, and the judge, they had a ex parte communication on this in the back room. But Palmer had a 2-page motion in his hand, and he gave it to Paul, and Paul said, my co-counsel pro se, which by that time they'd all had me appointed to help represent myself, my strategy move on Paul's part. I told him I wasn't crazy enough. He said, don't worry about it. He said, they know how smart you are. And it's, if we can give them anything to worry about, we're going to do it. So they gave me a copy of it. It was a motion to dismiss a bunch of BS language from the district attorney saying time is never the ally of the prosecution, and enough time has passed. We moved for the dismissal of all charges. And so, just well, okay. And Paul said, with prejudice, Your Honor. And that's another one of them 75 cents. Yeah. Or it's charge could never be raised against me again. And he agreed. About that time, the media comes busting. And the judge looked startled and looked at Mr. Palmer. Did you call them? No, sir. Okay. And he looked about as startled as the judge, and looked at Paul. And I said, Mr. Young, did you call them? I said, no, sir. He didn't ask me. we exited the courtroom, top of the stairs outside. Palmer stepped forward to make a statement. And basically he said that, a bunch of BS, time is never an ally of the prosecution. We've determined that there just isn't evidence to proceed. Can I ask why there isn't evidence? Could it have anything to do with the fact you hid it from us for more than 7 years? But we went across the street to Paul's office, and I called my son. Who was in college. I missed a lot of years of them growing up. I told him it was all over with. And we talked soon. Again, it had taken 7 years, during which I was convicted, unconvicted, be accused again. But in my instance, because of man, became my greatest friend, still is. We prevailed. And another short story. I've got 1,000 stories within the story, and I apologize for going on for so long. But this is what the journey is all about. It's about people like me. It's not about my story, but it's about the power of those stories and what they can do when we get the opportunity to speak before an audience. We can share those stories. They give us a credibility that you can't buy. Excuse me. I've spoken in places where when I start speaking, they don't know what my story is or why I'm there or anything. And, I'll start with, I'm opposed to the death penalty. And invariably you're met with the dismissal is, well, you feel differently if it happened to someone that you love. I'm responsible. You're right. I did feel differently when my wife was murdered. Let's talk about it. Mm-hmm. So we are able to meet those challenges and their dismissals. Well, I'm going to feel differently. The question is if I'm going to stay trapped in it forever. Most of us have to go through some healing. Our faith may not be strong enough for us to immediately go to this forgiveness stuff. And mine certainly wasn't. It took some healing. And it was only me coming to know Bill Pelkey on the first Journey of Hope in 1993 in Indiana, and hear Bill speak for the first time. But I went, wow, you mean I could one day come to forgiveness? I was at the point where I had come back to where I can't believe it in the death penalty. I mean, it had happened in my own life. An innocent man can be accused and convicted of something he didn't do. I know it happened to me. Unless I've been dreaming for 30 years, but I don't think that was the case. But anyway, we need the language to meet those challenges. And from this moment on, if someone challenges you with, you feel differently if it happens to someone you love. So you're right. let me tell you about my friend George, or SueZann, or, we can't go and get in front of everybody, but we can let our stories be told in ways. And say, these are real people, I saw them. Need someone to keep him upright. Anyway, that's, I can talk, Abel, tell you. He told me ahead of time to get the short version. And I agree with it. You know, I taught that boy differently. I'll take whatever time I'm needed.
Thank you, George.
Good. Yes.
Just a quick one. Did they ever find the person who murdered your wife?
No, but thank you for asking that. No, they never, by the time they actually started looking for him, the trail was 7 years cold. And Paul and I turned over to law enforcement and the DA's office, such as it is, the information we had uncovered. And we identified a man who was probably the killer and was at least our chief suspect. But at that time, he was in jail over in Georgia for a crime similar as to what happened to my wife. So at least if it was him, the last I heard, he was still alive. You know, we probably will not get that satisfaction in this lifetime. Yes.
George, it's incredible that you ended up with 3 bullets in you? Or 2?
Yes, sir.
And yet you shot yourself, is that what they were claiming?
That was the story. I'll attest to this. I mean, maybe you can shoot yourself one time. Maybe twice. But I've never met a man with the intestinal whatever that would shoot himself 3 times. Because it hurts when you get shot. Anyway, yes, ma'am.
I just want to know, when you were sentenced at all times, was it the same judge or was it different?
It was the same judge. He recused himself when my conviction was overturned. And actually, he was named in the appellate decision by the appellate court, which they rarely do. He was taken to task by the appellate court for stuff that he did that was helped get me convicted. However, he came to us the day after I was exonerated. His name was Judge Butts. He came to Paul's office, and I was still coming in every day. I had to have someplace to go. And the girls came back, and Paul and I were discussing what we would do. Judge Butts was out here. Paul started to get up. She said, no, he wants to talk to George. So I went out there, and he had the good grace to say that he knew in his heart that I was not guilty, but he lacked the guts to make the decision to dismiss it when he should. And I told him, well, Judge, you've seen me in various capacities over the last 7 years. I said, I think you know you've got nothing to worry about from me. I said, if it ever happens again, I said, when you make that call, please don't look around the courtroom to see which way the wind's blowing. Go with what you know is right in your heart and in your gut. And he promised to do that. And then he said, you know, if I can assist you in any way, please call me. Well, I do. Should we provide a reference? He said, well, you betcha. So actually, a few weeks later, I heard about this job in the Alabama Prison Project in Montgomery. And Paul and I decided, you know, it'd be better for me to stay in Alabama and thus pursue law enforcement to try to get them to find that. But when I went up on the interview with Lucia Penland, who at that time was executive director of the Alabama Prison Project, it was a nonprofit, and they did various things. But when I walked in the door, Lucia looked up and she put the phone. You'll never guess who just called me. And she said, I have never had a judge speak so highly of an individual as he just did. I said, well, I hope you appreciate the irony. He's the judge that sentenced me to life in prison. He said, oh, Jordan, we know that your case. We followed it for years. And I said, well, do I have a chance for the job? She said, you're hired. Anyway, thank you so much for. I get over there.
Now, one thing which is interesting is that I was a college professor at a college where Tom, the son, was working.
Wow.
And George and I didn't know that at the time when we first met, but it was.
We were going to Lynchburg the next day from wherever we worked. And Jack mentioned, he had students that, his mother was worried, Jack, that's my son. And, really? Yeah, and Jack and I had known each other, a few years at that point. He hadn't put it together that this kid was my son. Yeah, bless his heart. All right.
Let me make quick announcements before we do the next one.
Yeah.
Just quickly, before we have our final speaker, I want to thank everybody for coming. And when we break, there'll be kind of a scramble to move and help people get back in from outside. Tomorrow morning, we're going to start again early. Let's shoot to be here by 8 a.m. As many people as possible, because tomorrow is the last day of the Supreme Court session.
Oh,
right?
wow. Okay.
And there's big rulings coming out, including potentially awful. Well, they're all potentially awful. But in any case, we want to make sure that we hold our space and that we maintain our presence. So we need all hands on deck. To the extent possible, be here at 8 a.m. Okay? So that's number one. Number two, we have a few new faces here. I want to make sure you know if you'd like a t-shirt like this or some of the others that we have, before you leave, see me back in the corner. They're free as long as you'll wear them. So there's that. I think everybody else here is pretty, okay. And then we go on until, so we have another teach-in tomorrow at 6 p.m. And then we're overnight. We're staying out all night, overnight, and continuous until midnight on Tuesday, the night of the 2nd, okay? And so we have a teach-in like this at 6 p.m. tomorrow night, and again at 6 p.m. on Tuesday. And also we've moved our rally to Tuesday, so as not to conflict with all the hubbub that's happening on. We'll still get out and yell at people, make our voices heard tomorrow morning, but we're gonna make the media availability is on Tuesday. So thank you very much. Those are the announcements.
Now, our last speaker of the evening is a man that you all know, and that's Art Laffin, who is multi-talented, Dorothy Day Catholic worker, a person I knew. I'd stayed in his room at the Dorothy Day Catholic Worker while he was up in New Haven back in the 1990s. So this is, I can't tell you how much Art means to the movement of the Journey of Hope. He's also a plowshare activist. author, et cetera. And we're just honored to have him here be with us each year. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for that very gracious introduction. And I know it's been a long day, and it's getting to be that time where we're supposed to end. And some of you have heard my story before, but I'm going to keep what I want to do much briefer than what I thought I might have more time to do. But what I want to do is just take a moment for us to call into our presence the cloud of witnesses, those who have gone before us, and those who continue to inspire us and sustain us in our work. And I just like to begin by calling out some names of people who have gone home to God, who have been very important to us in our journey of hope, our journey of life. And I'd like to begin by calling into our presence our brother Bill Pelkey. I'd like to remember Rennie Cushing, Charlene, who our brother George, who just invoked, Louis Perez, who Delia spoke of just at the beginning of our program tonight, David Atwood, Greg Wilhoit, whose sister is here, who I just met tonight. And please, can you call out other names of people that we want to be remembered tonight?
Mike Kennedy.
Dan Wilson. Tim Span.
Dave Clark.
Marilyn.
And we say presente together. Presente to these and so many more. I want to thank.
Take one step back.
I want to thank personally Scott and Abe for the incredible job that they've been doing to keep this going. Charles and all the DPA staff and volunteers. I just met Reverend Risher last night. I've seen her on Zoom, but and there's so many people who are involved in making this happen, and for all the incredible work that's gone on with the DPA this past year. Can we just give a rousing? And it was around 1996 where I happened on this amazing community. And so imagine if you were here tonight, and then 3 years later, all of a sudden, you become a murder victim family member. Well, so that's what happened with me. I was called by Abe to the Catholic Worker to help prepare a meal to break the fast for these people who were protesting the death penalty outside the Supreme Court. And I said, sure, this is what we do at the Catholic Worker, prepare a meal for the fasters. But I said, okay, what time? Midnight. Midnight. outside the Supreme Court. Okay. It's an unusual request, but okay, we're gonna do it, And that's how I got introduced to this amazing group. And then a year later was invited to participate in the first resistance action on the steps of the Supreme Court. I always say there's nothing supreme about a court that sanctions killing. And so there were a number of us, 18 arrested. 1997. Could you raise your hand if you're part of that action? George?
They're
Dave?
outside.
Some people outside. Right, for holding that 30-foot long banner, Stop Executions. And then every 5 years since, there have been people arrested making that statement in front of the court. During COVID, it was near the Senate Hart Building. But there's a story here of resistance and of resilience. And in the face of all the tragedy that people have experienced, there's the journey of hope that has risen out of this, that we're all part of. And 1999, my younger brother Paul was murdered outside the shelter housing program where he was the associate director in Hartford, Connecticut. And it's the 25th anniversary, but it still seems like yesterday of his murder. And I still can't believe what happened. And I was able, in the moment of that tragedy, to, and I won't go into it because of the time, but it took me to a place I'd never been before, and the sorrow that I experienced was, it defies words. It defies words. And so where do you go? You know, I've been involved in the nonviolence movement and the faith-based communities for justice and peace, and you know, and here my brother was murdered. And talk about the press. Somebody was talking earlier about the press wanting to interview, and Reverend Risher was saying that last night. And we were besieged by the media. My brother was very well known, and so it took me to a place of deep prayer and reflection, and to reflect on Jesus's command. What does it mean to love your enemy? What does it mean to be merciful toward the person who would commit such a unexplainable act of violence? And what I discovered really was, Jesus telling me personally, be merciful as God is merciful. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. And then I go a little further and I reflect on Jesus being on the cross as he's being crucified, as he's beginning the death penalty of his day. He's putting into practice the seemingly impossible command to love your enemies by asking God to forgive those who are murdering. Thereby, in my understanding, showing people for all time how to live and how to die. Mm-hmm. And so that's my faith, and that's the faith of people who believe in God and believe in Jesus, and yet the pain and the heartbreak and the anguish is so great and so deep that it can become overwhelming when you lose a loved one. And George just spoke so powerfully about that. And you heard SueZann speak about it, and you heard Brother Jack speak about it, and so we need communities of faith, hope, and healing. And this is what this community is. As we continue to persevere. I always am reminded, that we are all potential victims of violence.
Yeah.
Every single one of us. We live in a time where everybody is a potential victim. And we live in a world where killing has become normalized, where even genocide has become normalized. And what do? How can we break the cycle of violence? And I deeply believe that it's through the power and example of people like Jesus and Dr. King and Gandhi and all the great prophets of nonviolence throughout history that can help us and guide us and sustain us as we move into the unknown future, where we don't know what's going to come down next week. We're right in the shadow here of the U.S. empire, and anything can happen. And so we have to. I began by saying, keep your eyes on the prize. We got to keep our eyes on the prize. We have to stay rooted in what we would call faith, a belief that Dr. King said it well. He said, "Love, even for enemies, is the key to the solution of the problems of our world." Think about that. Love, even for enemies, is the key to the solution of the problems of our world. And now more than ever, we need to embrace this spirit of nonviolence and justice and love. It's our only hope. It's our only hope, and this is what we're doing, together, and what we've done with so many people throughout the years, and we're part of a long tradition in history of people of faith and conscience who have borne witness to the truth and have given their lives. I just want to hold up when I first experienced this unspeakable tragedy of my brother being murdered. It was people like Brother Bill Pelkey and George, and Marietta Yeager Lane, who's not here with us now. She's in Florida. But we had phone conversations, and they really, really helped me, to understand, the pain, but out of that pain, the effort that can be made to overcome it, to live with it and try to overcome it. Let's say that. And what I know is the best way to honor my brother Paul is to work for the prevention of violence and not to replicate it.
Yeah.
That's the best way to honor my loved one. And I have a picture here, I could just pass it around, of my brother. I also just want to pass around a couple other things too. This is a picture of an article about Brother Dennis Sutar, the man who killed my brother. As Kat was talking about the situation of mental illness and people impacted by the death penalty. Dennis had suffered from severe paranoid schizophrenia and been hospitalized 3 times and estranged from his family, and eventually people knew he was a danger to himself and to others, and he had threatened people. Anyway, on September 20th, 1999, as my brother's leaving work, Dennis, who often frequented the soup kitchen and shelter, stabbed my brother repeatedly. My brother died shortly afterwards. And what this shows, though, is that the emphasis, as was said earlier, is not on helping people who are mentally ill to become whole, It's rather to warehouse people, put them back onto the street, and then this results in the tragic murder of my brother. And so where are the resources going? What's the priority, for prevention of such crimes? And so I'm passing around another booklet that was done, a conference I attended in Texas that was sponsored by the National Association for Mental Illness and Murder Victims' Families for Human Rights at the time that Rennie Cushing helped to start. It's kind of a documentation of what came out of this conference, of people who have been impacted by mental illness, how mental illness has created tragedy for families and people who have been executed because of their mental illness. And so right now, I guess I just want to end by saying that this book here is a very important book, The Journey of Hope.
Yeah.
From Violence to Healing by Brother Bill Pelkey. And I just encourage you to read it. It tells a story of the journey of hope of Bill's transformation, how it's impacted so many people. One of the things that some of you may not know is Bill really, in saying that he would respond to any request to end the death penalty, it led him to go international and introduce us to communities like the community of Sant'Egidio in Italy that's been working worldwide to abolish the death penalty and has sponsored some of us here on speaking tours, including George and SueZann. Myself, I've spoken in Italy and Spain and Germany, Mozambique, the Philippines, all really circling back to Bill's connection and the community of Sant'Egidio being inspired by what Bill and other members of the Journey of Hope began. To bring murder victim family members and death row exonerees to tell their stories about what happened to them and why they oppose state-sanctioned killing, and why they believe in a system of restorative, transformative justice. And so, as we end our gathering tonight, let's give thanks to God for all the work that's going on here. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And in so many other places around the world, there are over 28,000 people on death rows worldwide. And certainly we know the people here in the U.S., but it's a global thing. And then, many other people are facing, are targeted or facing imminent death because of their color, because of their race, ethnicity. And so we got our work cut out for us. We have to keep our eyes on the prize and keep at it and never lose heart. And so we got to pray when the Spirit says pray. We got to pray when the Spirit says pray. When the Spirit says pray, we better pray, oh Lord. Got to pray when the Spirit says pray. You got to fast when the Spirit says fast. You got to fast when the Spirit says fast. When the Spirit says fast, you better fast, oh Lord. Got to fast when the Spirit says fast. You got to act when the Spirit says act. You got to act when the Spirit says act. When the Spirit says act, you better act, oh Lord. You got to act when the Spirit says act. You got to move when the Spirit says move. You gotta move when the Spirit says move. When the Spirit says move, you better move, oh Lord. You gotta move when the Spirit says move. You gotta pray when the Spirit says pray. You gotta act when the Spirit says act. You gotta move when the Spirit says move. And just to end, a quote from Brother Troy Davis. How many of us were out in the streets demonstrating, trying to save Troy's life? Look around. Troy was an African American who was convicted of murder and sentenced to death in Georgia despite evidence of his innocence. He faced 3 execution dates and spent over 20 years on death row before the state of Georgia finally executed him on September 21st, 2011. In a case that received worldwide attention with numerous officials calling for his life to be spared, Davis maintained his innocence until the end. He offered these inspiring words to all who supported him shortly before his execution. Quote, "Thank you, and remember I am in a place where execution can only destroy your physical form. But because of my faith in God, my family, and all of you, I have been spiritually free for some time. And no matter what happens in the days and weeks to come, this movement to end the death penalty, to seek true justice, to expose a system that fails to protect the innocent, must be accelerated. There are many more Troy Davises. We need to dismantle this unjust system city by city, state by state, and country by country. I can't wait to stand with you, no matter if that is in a physical or spiritual form." And so, we here gather, hunger and thirst for justice. We cry out with our lives for an end to state-sanctioned killing. We are on a journey of hope. We are starving for justice. Amen.